We're very excited. We've got two wonderful people with us today, Tom Schwab and Evan Baldridge. They are going to talk to us about the Napoleon Golf Course in Napoleon, Ohio. It's a 9-hole municipal golf course, and we spend a lot of time in the golf world talking about big projects and big things. And this is a look at a little bit something different, a little bit smaller, but no less important. And to the community there, it's as important as anything. So, Tom and Evan, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you, Will.
Tom, let's start with you. We first met at the NLT symposium in Washington, D.C. I guess that was in 22, maybe.
And fall of 23.
Fall of 23, excuse me. And you were there because you had been working at the Napoleon Golf Course for a couple of years, and we're really trying to figure out how to improve it, right?
Yeah, that was a great week there in DC. I had a great time. I learned a lot, met a lot of great people. And I remember back when I originally seen the people that you guys were going to have there at that symposium and a lot of the topics and some of the superintendents that you guys were having there, I was like, oh man, I need to figure out a way to get to this. And at the time, I was only 1 year in with the city, not even really a full year. And I remember our continuing education budget at the time was basically zero. It was kind of zeroed out. My predecessor that retired, he didn't really use that line item in the budget much, so they kind of zeroed that sucker out. Maybe the last couple of years of his tenure. So when I approached my supervisor at the city, and I said, "Hey man, I really need to get to this. This will be there's a lot of people there that could possibly answer a whole lot of questions or help me out and guide me maybe in the direction I want to go." And I remember he said, "Man, you can't. We don't have the money in the budget for it." And of course, I whined and complained for a while, and then after a few weeks, I was able to we were able to figure a couple bucks up to get me out there to DC, and I'm so glad we did. That was a great opportunity to go out there and meet all you guys and pick up a lot of good information that really actually is even helping us here today.
What role has the golf course historically played in the community?
It's kind of it's the place to kind of hang out. There's a lot of the older members and that have been playing the club a lot. They kind of tend to congregate around. There's where the gossip is in the golf shop, So it's a pretty important role for the residents that choose to play golf and be involved with the sport here in town.
Yeah. Evan, I want to bring you in. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your path in the game. It's funny, I was doing a little research, and your path reminds me of my own, but only about 25, 30 years different. So tell us a little bit about you, and then I'd love to get your sort of initial take on the golf course when you first saw it.
Yeah, appreciate it. So I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. Always had a passion for the game. Always knew I probably wanted to work somewhere in the golf course business. So I went to landscape architecture school at the University of Kentucky. Got some experience working golf construction with a contractor, but always knew I wanted to go the way of design. So I started working with Renaissance Golf and Tom Doak as an intern in 2022 at Sand Valley. Spent a couple years up there. And after I graduated from school, went full-time on my own, shaping on their really great projects. I always wanted to have some of my own projects at the same time too. And when Tom, about a year and a half ago, went on the Fried Egg Pod and kind of declared that he was looking for some help, it seemed like a really great person to work with. It was clearly his passion for the golf course and like just his openness to look for advice and ask questions. It was like I knew clearly that would be someone who was really great to work with. So reached out to him, and the response couldn't have been any greater. When I first saw the site, it would have been probably October of 2024. First impression was the piece of ground, actually. To me, it reminded me of some of the better courses I'd seen in the upper Midwest. A lot of the courses in that area were built kind of where the floodplain kind of interacts with a higher plateau. So there's these really sharp transitions, 20, 25 feet, similar to like you'd see up at Inverness up the road, or place like Kenosha Country Club, Milwaukee Country Club, Pine Hills in Wisconsin, and somewhat similar to like the ravine landscape in Cincinnati. And so I knew that it had some really nice property, but there was much better potential to kind of take advantage of it. And then once you get on site, you realize that some of the contour down in the floodplain is actually quite good, particularly holes 4, 7, and 8. For land that you would think would be flat, actually has some really good contour. So from kind of using some different angles to look at tee shots and play the holes differently, and just by tree clearing and like just so you have a greater appreciation for the contour that the site has, and opening it up with a little bit more short grass where the ball can kind of interact with some of that really nice contour. Initially I knew, yeah, this has got some really good potential.
Well, Tom, when you took over in 22, I think 23, 22, excuse me,
Yeah, ball 22. Yeah.
all of 22. Um, clearly you'd been out of golf for 8, 9 years at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and having listened to your Fried Egg Pod and spoken to you, you're a golf architecture nerd, right? Like,
Oh, absolutely.
when did I
I'm
guess?
keeping up with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and so like obviously you were still sort of on top of things when it came to golf architecture and all that sort of stuff, and here you are coming in to be the superintendent of a 9-hole municipal golf course in rural Ohio, but you clearly had this knowledge base and passion for more than just sort of maintaining the turf. How was that received when you first came in? I mean, I'm sure you had a bunch of ideas.
Oh yeah. I got a lot of weird looks to be honest with you. Napoleon's kind of a sleepy little Midwest town. Not a whole lot happens. Not, maybe some people are used to stuff just not ever happening and just staying the same. So, like you said, I had a lot of ideas. I was fortunate enough to see and do a lot of really neat things at a lot of very great golf courses. And when you walk the property at Napoleon, you in your head, you're like, man, like this feature, that feature would be great there. I always felt, in my head, yeah, that would be awesome to do some stuff, but putting a certain bunker or a certain feature out on the golf course and in one given place, is it the right place? That's where I was kind of like, I should probably be better suited to try to talk to an architect that could help me out with that, because Evan's way better at that than I am. So although, yeah, we're all architecture nerds, I'm by no means an architect. So, I wanted to kind of get a more formalized plan in place instead of me scribbling down drawings and ideas on paper and presenting it to anybody within the city or our local golfers. Before I got too carried away with that, like I said, I wanted to get something more formal, and getting Evan on board was the key to that.
Yeah, so let's just talk a little bit quickly about what you found, the conditions you found when you got there, at least the infrastructure, before we can get to the architecture, and then what you did in those first couple of years to improve some of that infrastructure, while also sort of understanding your desire to make the golf course better from a playability strategic standpoint.
Once you kind of get over the initial fear of like, man, there's a lot of stuff to kind of repair and get this place back in order. I wouldn't say it was in horrible condition. The putting greens, for many, many years, they were in great health. If anything, they were probably just overwatered, maybe over fertilized. They were kind of fat and happy. Super slow greens. Everybody just always talk about how slow the greens always were at Napoleon, slow and soft. So there's not a lot of drainage infrastructure. So yeah, just getting everything buttoned back up, getting the plant health back, the playing conditions better. That was obviously the first thing I wanted to focus on, was just the conditioning of the overall golf course, getting the greens right. And then I thought that would be the first step, making sure that, showing everybody in town what we could do as a staff to dial up this golf course. And then I figured maybe if I start talking about doing some fun renovation stuff, maybe they'll be more open to that concept. And, so far so good, they have been.
So Evan, you came in, saw the site, you've talked about its potential. How did you go about sort of prioritizing what needed to be done and sort of determining a phasing approach to this?
Determining phasing was always going to be kind of dependent on our constraints, which in this case are, like we said, working within probably an existing budget, low budget, and the manpower. And manpower is just Tom and one assistant, and like any extra help we can get. We wanted to start, the goal was to start with something that was a little bit more achievable and work our way up, leaving the, maybe the biggest projects for the end, so that if we do need something that we might need some appropriations for, then maybe by that point there's enough buy-in. But we wanted to start small. But when I came in, there was a couple things that like kind of directed me as to what we would be doing. Like I said, one of those is the budget. From the beginning, Tom said to me, I really like our golf course. I think it's kind of a hidden gem that nobody really knows about. And I don't want to change, it's like, I don't want to do plastic surgery. We just need to put makeup on it. So, we knew from the start, and we don't have the money. We need to focus on achievable goals. And so that kind of led me with kind of what's the toolbox that we're using. From the beginning, Tom had said, we have excess material that we can use to shape features with. The city runs a cemetery next door, and they're always doing excavation projects, so they have abundant material. So I knew from the start that, some sort of mounding, cop-style mounding that you would see on country courses in the UK, which are some of my favorite places to play the game, would be a part of it. But definitely, the idea of keeping bunkers was also something that I think a lot of probably the regular golfers would expect to see. So having kind of a diversity, trying to think about a diversity of different hazards and features and tools that we could use and trying to tie all that together. And then I think kind of the other big driver to how I've thought about the project and what needs to be done is just looking at kind of the median player at Napoleon Golf Club. There's a lot of beginners that learn the game at Napoleon, a lot of seniors. The median player probably, if they hit the ball 200 yards at Napoleon, that's probably about average. So, and there's a number of holes at Napoleon that are kind of in that 400 to 500 yard range. And so for those, I'm thinking about those just as much as 3-shot holes, if not more than 2-shot holes. And so trying to think about keeping a lot of intrigue in the approaches or in the layup zones so that, a shorter player is able to compete and have interest with a longer player who, it still might be difficult to hit some greens with a 7-iron, but they can compete with a 3rd shot with a pitching wedge. And so I think that's really directed the scope of the work and how I've thought about it.
Well, let's talk about the phase 1 that you guys did in the fall. What was involved, and how successful do you think it turned out?
We focused on holes 3, 4, and 5. The 3rd green, we expanded a small green expansion out front of the putting surface. Evan rebuilt the front right bunker. I would say enlarged it just a wee bit. It's nothing substantial. Removed the bunker left side, created some mounding features. So yeah, bunker mounding and green expansion for the 3rd, also with some drainage infrastructure. Thankfully, with the 3rd green, we did not have to move any irrigation lines, control lines, or heads. So 3 was pretty simple. And then the 4th hole, there's a series of moundings down the fairway from about 200 and in, and then a pretty substantial green expansion in the front left, front right, and back, especially the back of 4 green. Myself and my assistant Colton, we had 4 green kind of finished up, I think, before Evan got there. We did have to re-loop most of the irrigation around the 4th green, which is actually going to benefit us in the future. The irrigation around that I was never really happy with the layout of it anyhow, so it's going to serve us a lot better now. And then this fall, moving on to the 5th hole. Late this fall, we started rebuilding the 5th tee. It's a longer par 5. It's a longer par 5 for most of our players at Napoleon, but we're in the process of trying to get that leveled out and kind of rebuilt. And then moving up to the putting surface, Evan reshaped and rebuilt the left side bunker on 5 green, and myself and Colton, we got the drainage and the sod and everything done and wrapped up later last fall. And the only thing that we didn't quite get to was the green expansion on 5, and we'll probably do the front right or the right side expansion this spring, hopefully in April or early May. And then we kind of have to replenish our nursery stock and regrow in our greens nursery to kind of continue with the left side of 5, hopefully next fall with some of the other expansions we're thinking about doing.
I think one thing to note is that this kind of the state of the bunkers when I found them, and still some of the ones out there, were not in the best state. They over years they just continued to add sand in them, and they just like hardened and hardened over time to the point where now a lot of the bunkers are they're well above kind of like the surrounding area. And so we decided if we're gonna touch bunkers, we need to put drainage in them and have much better constructed bunkers. And Tom found some really cost-effective solutions to where the 2 bunkers that we did rebuild, they cost next to nothing, using old sports turf as the liner in the bottoms of it.
Where did that idea come from, and how difficult was it to source and then implement?
Well, that whole thing came about. I think it was last spring, about last year around this time. I was in Nashville, Tennessee, and Evan mentioned the Percy Warner golf course down there. Bruce Hepner just did that remodel a few years back, and he mentioned, hey, you might want to stop by and take a look. And I'm like, absolutely. So fortunately, I was able to take a walking tour of that little golf course and see all the work they did. And they had a ton of rain the night before. As I was walking the course, I was taking a look at all the features, the greens, but the bunkers also. And I kind of noticed that one of the bunkers had just a little tiny washout, maybe in the corner. And being nosy, I figured I'd take a see what kind of bunker liner they may or may not have used. So as I brushed away a little bit of the sand, I was like, I kind of looked at that turf or the liner, and to me, it appeared to be just white field turf. It looked like sports turf. And then I mentioned to Evan, I asked him what that product was, and he said he was familiar with it, and he used something similar like that in the past. So I said to Evan, I go, man, can't we just use sports turf? I could probably find rolls of that stuff really cheap. And so, yeah, I ran past Evan, and he said, man, it's worth a try. So, and it's been working and performing really well.
And to answer the question about how do we think it went? I mean, I think at least I had a little bit of trepidation coming in, given that, it was, we don't have much help, and it was the first project that we had undertaken. And Tom had to bear a lot of the work setting up for multiple weeks before I was able to come in and shape everything. And I think truly the results probably were better than I could have expected, and it's probably put a lot of wind in the sails for having faith for some of the upcoming projects we're planning.
It's great. If you're doing this, Tom, within sort of the annual budget, what kind of buy-in have you had to get from the town council or others who might have sort of oversight of the golf course?
You know what? I wish I had some elaborate story to tell you about how me and Evan pitched this great idea to everybody and wowed everybody with how great we are. But it wasn't anything like that. It was super simple. And that actually, that was kind of my fear early on. And I'm sure Evan had some concerns of anytime you're probably in most municipalities, they find plenty of ways to get in their own way and slow things down with bureaucracy and red tape. So that was one of our concerns, but that faded quickly when I first spoke with Tony Cotter. He is my supervisor with the city. He's a park and rec director. I kind of thought, okay, me and Evan have our plan together for phase one. I had a ballpark idea how much money this would cost us. So first step in my head was, okay, I got to get the approval of my boss. Let's see how this goes. And I could probably imagine he probably thought I was crazy at first too, and he thought this would be an astronomical amount of money and a hard sell. And as soon as I told him, well, look, man, I need $3,000 and I think we can get phase one going. And he looked at me like, well, just do it. And I'm like, well, great. We don't have to bring this to council. We don't need the park and rec board involved. He was like, no. So it was kind of reassuring that, Tony, I think had the trust and faith in what we had in mind and what we wanted to do. And it was just that simple. We didn't really have to deal with a whole lot of hurdles to kind of get started, which was nice because honestly, it kind of sped up the process. If we did, we may have not even started the project yet. So it was pretty easy peasy, man. It wasn't too hard.
There is some built-in advantages I think that you have in small town America. For one, there's not a ton of stakeholders. There's no lease agreement. There's no managing company. There's no management companies. It's really Tom, and he's got a couple bosses. And also from the community members and the players, they're much more friendly faces in Napoleon. I mean, Tom knows most of the golfers that are coming through there. So I think it's just the familiarity that they have with him and that he has with them that, it makes selling the work probably a little easier.
Yeah. And you didn't have to shut down for any of this work, right? I mean, this was all done during the sort of regular course of play.
Yeah, we never had to shut down. We may have from time to time shortened a couple golf holes. If remember up on 4 fairway when Evan was shaping out some of the mounding in those locations, I think I moved the tee markers way up, so he didn't have to slow down or worry about getting drilled with a golf ball and sitting in the excavator.
And then after the work was done this fall, was there enough time for people to get out and really see it and give you any feedback on the completed work?
Yeah, it was. We had a very short window there. We kind of wrapped up. Like Evan said, most of the labor is being done mostly by myself and my assistant Colton. So, Evan came in end of September for a week. He shaped everything up and got everything going and left us with some sound advice for how to finish up some of the features he built. So, we had a lot of stuff to get done real quick. All the drainage, the sodding, getting the sand, the liners in. So I think we kind of got everything buttoned up mid-October. We generally close in November 1st. So yeah, I mean, yeah, there was a handful of people to get out there, and they were excited about it. But we'll have much more this spring. So there's a lot of eyeballs that haven't quite seen what we have done yet.
Well, then what's next? What's phase two?
Yeah, I think we're going to work on probably expansions and tweaking kind of the perimeters and approaches on three more of the greens. So the first green, fifth green, as Tom talked about, which is kind of a continuation of last year's work, and the eighth green. And then, some alterations in the fairways too, some few bunkers, some of that kind of abrupt mounding kind of dictates some lines of play on the first, the eighth, and get started on the second fairway, which will probably be work of 2027, probably once we get to that green. So we'll be about, I would say, 40 to 45% of the way through all the work, probably at the end of this fall.
Tom, back on the Fried Egg podcast that was sort of instrumental in helping Evan get to you, you talked a little bit about the desire to add strategic elements to the golf course, and it sounds like you've hooked up with Evan to really guide that process. As you guys go through this, like, you guys are obviously on a very limited budget, and what are the sort of the both the challenges with that and also the opportunities? I mean, I think maybe this is a question for Evan more than you, but feel free to weigh in.
Oh, yeah, Evan, if you can take that if you want.
Yeah, totally.
Because Evan, I know you've done some shaping for Tom at some projects where the budget hasn't been a consideration or not a very big consideration.
Yeah,
It's really easy to be like,
not.
oh, let's go build another cool bunker over there. The only
It's,
reason why it's there or not is whether or not Tom Doak comes around and blesses it, right?
yeah, well, that's exactly right, and it's definitely like a different it's a different exercise, totally. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think you just have to work off your constraints. I think is the main thing. We're constrained in a few ways. We have single row irrigation. Eventually, maybe when the irrigation system can be rebuilt, we'd love to go to double row and have some expansion even further in some places. So we have we have some control of moving fairway lines, but no more than probably 5 paces in any direction. We had excess material that we could shape with, and then we had limited labor. So to really create strategy, I knew I was going to have to do it in like the most cost effective way, which to me was probably going to be like mounding, abrupt mounds that really draw your eye in some of the like more sublime parts of the property. So in like said earlier, the thought about trying to have trying to have those features interact for everybody, no matter the distances. The work we did on the fourth hole last year, the series of mounds through that hole, I think will interact with all players, whether it's on your second shot, third shot, or fourth shot. And then the other thing, going along with that kind of line of thinking of trying to design for players who probably hit the ball in the 200-yard, 220-yard range, or even less, is like, I think the most interest you can add is going to be in the approach to the greens. I worked one course I did work on. I think I learned a lot. It was Sedge Valley, and that course has a lot of half par type holes, whether they be long or quite short. And one thing I really like about the course is that there's only 3 sets of tees, and everybody's really playing off the same tee, no matter what distance you're playing. But there's just enough going on, like right in the approach and in those green surrounds, that it can be competitive for everybody. So like really focusing on that first 30 yards that lead into the green. Because I think that's where a lot of the play at Napoleon is going to happen, is people who are just shy of greens in regulation, probably.
What would your takeaways be if there's someone who's listening who wants to do something at their golf course, maybe in a small town similar to Napoleon or even bigger? What would your recommendations? What would your advice be?
You can do a lot with very little. It may take a while. You have to figure out a way to get it done. There's always a creative way to do what you want to do, even if you're restricted on money, equipment. You just kind of have to figure it out. You can, if you're willing to do the sweat equity and have a sore back and do a lot of the labor yourself, you can make a lot of things happen. Fortunately for us, that's what we're doing, and we have Evan on board, who graciously is doing this pro bono. By the way, he's doing all this for nothing. So that's the only way we could probably get this done. So I mean, you could do a lot with a little. You just need kind of the passion and the will to get it done and figure out how to get it done. And it could lead to, you know, to something great. Like, great golf doesn't have to be big golf. Great golf doesn't necessarily have to be at a country club or the private clubs. Great golf can happen in little places like Napoleon or the Schoolhouse 9 in Virginia. That's another wonderful example of small golf that I love. The game of golf's big enough for everybody and every type of golf, and I'd like to see that kind of direction or the game of golf keep going in that direction.
I would add, I mean, I just want to paint a picture. Like, what I do is relatively simple compared to what Tom and his assistant had to do. I mean, it was probably 6 weeks of prep work for him, just for phase one, working weekends, setting everything up, and then a handful of weeks even after I left, or after I just came in for a week to build things. So this can happen anywhere, particularly in small towns. You just have to have someone with the passion of someone like Tom, someone who cares that much about their place. If you have that, this can be accomplished. And the other thing I respect a lot about Tom is his willingness to try things. And, you know, most of the superintendents I've worked with all like to have everything, like to have a ton of control over things, and like to, you know, they don't like taking a bunch of chances on stuff. But Tom's willingness to like try something and just say, you know, we'll learn how to manage this over time, makes this project possible, where some people might, you know, shy away from some of the stuff that we're planning on doing.
Evan, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a wonderful discussion. I know I've learned a lot. I'm really impressed by both of your guys' passion for this project and for golf and golf architecture, and trying to, as you said, you know, make small golf great. And you know, it's really inspirational what you guys are up to in Napoleon. So I really appreciate the time and look forward to seeing it in person someday soon.
Yeah, you too, Will. Thank you. And thank you guys for everything you do for municipal golf across the country. You guys are having a bigger impact than you know.
We really appreciate you saying that. You know, this is about creating a community of people who are passionate about golf and community golf, and we appreciate everything that you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.